10,000 years ago, the god of war, Ye Junli, achieved a triumphant victory in the battle against the demons. However, the excessive bloodshed tainted his golden core, causing him to lose his divine essence. At the same time, his beloved Uncheon, the youngest son of the emperor, upon learning of this, hastened to kneel before a priest, tearfully begging for aid. Cheng Huan explained that if the man truly wished to save Ye Junli, he would need to cut open his heart and extract his golden core. Afterward, he would have to fuse that core with his own body to purify it for 10,000 years with his righteous spirit and blood. Uncheon was not a noble emperor. His body and spirit were inherently frail, which meant that once he extracted the core from himself to give it to Ye Junli, he would surely die. The man was willing to accept any outcome, satisfied simply with the fact that his beloved would live. However, he asked to keep this a secret, for the celestial being would never allow him to sacrifice himself, but if Uncheon made him hate him, it would make his own death easier to bear. The priest, seeing the man's resolute determination, gave his consent, allowing the ritual to take place that very night. He warned that under no circumstances could there be any hesitation or regret, or else all their efforts would be in vain. Upon arriving in Ye Junli's chambers, Uncheon sat beside his sleeping form, gently caressing his chest. The god of war was indeed so gravely injured that the celestial being couldn't even sense his qi, despite being so close. Gathering his thoughts, Uncheon sobbed softly, then abruptly thrust his hand into the other's body, intending to retrieve the golden core. The pain from this was so intense that Ye Junli instantly awoke, springing up from the bed and seizing the thief by the wrist. Seeing his beloved before him, the god of war could scarcely believe what was happening. Uncheon, cold and distant, declared that he wanted to end their relationship. Panic overtook Ye Junli, and he pleaded with the celestial being to reconsider. But it was all in vain. The blonde man called Ye Junli a fool, explaining that he had already witnessed the power and strength of the god of war and had merely used him. Tearing the golden core from the other's chest, Uncheon proclaimed that he needed it more, for with it, he could continue his path of self-cultivation. Without the golden core, Ye Junli would never be able to restore his divine essence, and soon he would likely be cast out from the realm of immortals, and from that moment on, nothing would ever bind the two of them together again. Despite all the pain, both physical and emotional, the god of war tried to stop Uncheon, refusing to believe either his actions or his words. But turning away, the celestial being coldly declared that he had never loved Ye Junli, and that their entire relationship had been nothing but a pretense. Ye Junli sensed the blatant falsehood in those words, but he was powerless to do anything, watching helplessly as his beloved walked away. Uncheon had forcefully cut open Ye Junli's heart and stolen his golden core. This act stripped him of his title as the god of war. In a single night, he became the most pitiful man in all 6 realms, enduring countless hardships and humiliations. Everyone around him mocked him, reminding him that the celestial being had abandoned him. Yet Ye Junli continued to insist that Uncheon would return one day. He was convinced that all he needed was to regain his former power, and then he would surely be able to await Uncheon's return. And so he waited. 1,000 years, 5,000, 10,000. But all that time, his beloved never once came to see him. In the end, the once pure heart that had endured countless hardships and humiliations was left utterly shattered, and in the ruins of those emotions, only a deep hatred remained. With great effort, step by step, he rose from being a wretched man whom everyone mocked to becoming the most revered inhabitant of the demon realm. He attained such power that all 6 realms began to fear him. Ye Junli became the honored lord of demons. One day, a shadow guard came to his temple with news that they had found traces of a man in the demon realm who greatly resembled the one the lord had been searching for. Ye Junli smirked, reluctant to believe the news. For 10,000 years, no one had been able to find a trace of him, and now he had suddenly fallen into their hands so easily. It all seemed like another cunning ploy, but Ye Junli still ordered the captured celestial being to be brought to the temple. Standing beside the bound and slightly wounded body, Ye Junli grasped his chin, staring into those shameless eyes. Uncheon answered none of his questions, and the Lord's irritation began to grow. Hearing the Celestial's plea for death, Ye Junli laughed, calling it too convenient an end. Considering the potential benefits of divine power, Ye Junli decided to spare Uncheon's life for the time being, making him his loyal dog. The blonde feigned indifference, which infuriated the Lord to such an extent that he hurled the Celestial's body onto the floor with tremendous force. On the other hand, Ye Junli rather enjoyed the fact that after 10,000 years of absence, Uncheon had become much rougher. In an instant, a spiritual bone whip appeared in his hand, and it swiftly coiled around the other's slender neck, tightening with every passing second. The Lord was genuinely curious how long the Celestial would endure his punishment, so he dragged Uncheon along with him. After some time, he brought the blonde to his chambers, unceremoniously throwing him onto the bed. Before proceeding with his tortures, Ye Junli offered the man one more chance to return the golden core right then and there. As expected, Uncheon only laughed, shaking his head. The core had long since fused with his bones and merged with his blood, and unless he willingly gave it up, there was no other way for the god of war to reclaim it. The Lord had hoped his former lover would be wiser, but instead, he had chosen to be treated like a dog, enduring the torment. Ye Junli threatened to kill the Celestial, but Uncheon warned that if he did, the golden core inside him would immediately dissipate and its true owner along with it. The man laughed, realizing that these were empty threats, and the blonde had likely been hiding nearby all this time, waiting. However, he still couldn't grasp the depth of the hatred between them. 10,000 years ago, they had been intimately close, living in peace and harmony. The realization that their entire relationship had been a lie all along enraged Ye Junli. Swinging the bone whip with all his might, the Lord struck the Celestial, recalling how, in the past, Uncheon had feared pain more than anything, and now he was curious how it felt to him now. The wound on Uncheon's neck bled profusely, and all he could do was gasp for breath, no longer able to retort with the sharp wit he had displayed earlier. Watching the Celestial wheeze in pain, Ye Junli clicked his tongue in annoyance and helped him stop the bleeding. Wounds inflicted by the spiritual bone whip would bleed endlessly, and the scars it left would never heal. But this meager punishment was not even a fraction of the torment the god of war had endured over the years. In a single moment, something within Uncheon seemed to break, and his body betrayed him, unable to resist no matter how hard he tried to escape the other's grasp. Ye Junli decided to personally show the Celestial what it was like to be used by someone who no longer loved him. In the past, when he had believed they loved one another, he had been gentle and kind. But now Uncheon was nothing more than a prisoner, a mere plaything for the Lord to vent his anger upon. After the punishment was carried out, all the Celestial felt was unbearable pain in his lower back. Naturally, Ye Junli hadn't been gentle with him then, just as he wasn't now. Barking a command, he ordered the blonde to get up and dress. Trying to stand, Uncheon stumbled and fell, provoking yet another wave of irritation from the Lord. Ye Junli sneered, asking for whom the blonde was putting on this performance, but received no reply. The question shocked Uncheon. He couldn't understand why Ye Junli truly believed he was pretending. The man had never been so cold and indifferent before. But the Celestial had chosen this path himself, and now it was too late to turn back. And since that was the case, there was no point in suffering now. At least Ye Junli wouldn't kill him until he reclaimed his golden core. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. The demon healer Ran Chen had arrived, summoned by the Lord in advance. Hearing the familiar name of the one he was to treat, Ran Chen's eyes widened. He had encountered this man before. The healer couldn't understand how a celestial being could be in such a place. And moreover, he hadn't expected that the mysterious man brought to the palace the previous day would turn out to be Uncheon. 10,000 years ago, it was this very celestial who had saved him from a deadly pursuit. Ran Chen had been gravely wounded back then, but thanks to Uncheon, he had survived. Later, Ran Chen had wanted to repay the celestial for his kindness, but no matter how long he searched, he never found him. Who could have imagined that Uncheon would suddenly appear here and now? Ye Junli tersely instructed the healer to treat the celestial's wounds, which greatly surprised the blonde. Before he could react, Ran Chen had already moved closer, greeting him and explaining what he was about to do. Seeing the severity of the wounds inflicted by the Lord, the healer sighed heavily. He knew Ye Junli could be cruel, but he had hoped not to this extent. Watching how Ran Chen tended to Uncheon, Ye Junli lost his patience and slammed his fist on the table, reminding the healer that he was there to help, not to prattle on about nonsense. The man began to stammer out an explanation, but the Celestial interrupted him, stating that Ran Chen wasn't at fault. It was all because of him. This reaction amused the Lord slightly. Earlier, when alone with him, Uncheon hadn't been able to utter a single word, yet now he hissed in pain when the healer merely applied medicine to his arm. From this, Ye Junli concluded that the blonde was merely trying to feign innocence, seducing others just as he had once seduced him. Raising his gaze, Uncheon asked why the man was dragging innocent people into their personal feud. But the Lord merely laughed, tightening his grip around the other's throat, causing the Celestial to choke and beg for release. Ranchen decided to intervene, pleading with Ye Junli to stop, explaining that it was entirely his fault and no one else's, only to be ordered to keep his mouth shut. Leaning closer to Uncheon, the man mockingly asked when exactly the Celestial had managed to make the healer plead for his mercy. Suddenly, shadow guards burst into the room with news that something strange was happening at the Wasteland Lake. The magical barrier surrounding it had suddenly collapsed, and the ice that covered its surface had melted, with the water now turning into an icy torrent spilling out of the lake's basin. As a result, poisonous gases rising from the lakebed began spreading uncontrollably throughout the area. Several demons had already been poisoned. Ye Junli understood what this could lead to. But first, they needed to find the purest divine energy to cleanse the Wasteland Lake. And given that he no longer had his golden core, he ordered Uncheon to be thrown into the lake, leaving him to struggle there until the waters were purified. The shadow guards immediately obeyed, seizing the Celestial by the arms. Before long, the blonde was cast into the lake, left to his fate. Surfacing, he called out for help, but no one responded, while Ran Chen hurriedly reminded the Lord that Uncheon's wounds had not yet healed. Ye Junli didn't so much as raise an eyebrow, declaring that the Celestial's divine power would be more than enough to endure this. The man, visibly irritated, couldn't understand why Uncheon was struggling to stay afloat when he used to be an excellent swimmer. Sinking to the bottom, the blonde lost consciousness, and as expected, the core within him purified the lake. Those standing on the shore grew tense when the Celestial didn't resurface. But Ye Junli remained unmoved by their words, still doubting. He believed this was just another ploy to gain sympathy, though it was starting to lose its humor. One of the shadow guards bluntly stated that the Celestial had drowned, but the Lord cut him off, calling Uncheon a masterful deceiver, convinced it was another one of his tricks. Quite some time passed before the guard spoke again, insisting the man had indeed drowned, but Ye Junli still refused to believe it. He began ordering Uncheon to stop pretending. But when there was no response, as before, panic gripped the Lord. Unable to bear it, he dove into the lake, pulling the weakened Celestial's body from the depths. Using a spell that created a protective barrier around them, shielding them both from the water, Ye Junli almost tearfully begged him to wake up. But there was no reply. Uncheon was truly unconscious, forcing the Lord to share some of his spiritual energy. Then, pressing the blonde's body close to his, he once again pleaded for him to wake up, promising that there would be no more punishments. Surfacing from the water and then returning to the chambers, Ye Junli was deeply troubled by the Celestial's condition. The healer explained that Uncheon had not yet recovered from his previous injuries, which had been further aggravated by the poisonous gases from the lake, significantly worsening his state. Lifting his gaze, Ranchen noticed the concern in the Lord's eyes. He couldn't tell whether it was driven by deep love or perhaps just a lingering sense of duty. Most likely, he was mistaken, as Ye Junli had shown unwavering resolve when tormenting the Celestial, leaving no room for excess sentiment. Unexpectedly, Uncheon began to cough, slowly regaining consciousness, causing Ye Junli to appear even more anxious as he immediately pulled the blonde closer to him. Suddenly realizing he was behaving inappropriately, the Lord stood up abruptly, somewhat harshly commanding the Celestial to behave and stop these futile threats of dying. Ye Junli then ordered Ran Chen to keep a close eye on Uncheon before leaving both of them bewildered by what had just transpired. Without much hesitation, the healer offered to tend to the blonde's wounds, to which Uncheon immediately agreed. Soon, a conversation sparked between them, and Ran Chen curiously asked if it was true that the Celestial couldn't swim. Uncheon admitted that he didn't quite understand how it had happened. He had known how to swim, but as it turned out, things were different now. In truth, when he was thrown into the lake, he hadn't been able to access even a drop of his spiritual energy, likely due to the golden core lodged within his body. Trying to lighten the tense atmosphere, Ranchen remarked on how much Uncheon had changed, recalling how, at another lake long ago, water seemed not to exist for the Celestial. He had swum so effortlessly. Not fully grasping what was being said, the blonde raised a surprised gaze, asking when that had happened. The healer recounted how, years ago, someone had been pursuing him, and on the lake, he had been gravely wounded. Uncheon had appeared out of nowhere and saved him, thus sparing his life. However, Ranchen had been wearing a mask at the time, so the Celestial hadn't seen his face. And though much time had passed, the healer still remembered, emphasizing how strange that mask had been, which was why it stayed in his memory. The healer was overjoyed that Uncheon remembered him. All this time, he had wanted to repay the Celestial for saving him, but he had never expected to meet him in such a wretched place. Ranchen asked Uncheon to share what had happened in the past 10,000 years, but the Celestial politely declined, saying he couldn't speak of everything just yet. The man didn't press the issue. It was enough for him that Uncheon remembered, so he suggested they end the conversation and rest for a bit. As soon as the healer stepped out of the chambers, Uncheon fell unconscious again, murmuring Yejunli's name in his sleep. The Celestial dreamed of a time when he had once given his beloved a gift engraved with a phrase expressing his immense love for him. That gift had been a lover's lock. Uncheon had specially commissioned a matching pair and had asked Ye Junli to engrave something on his in return. Ye Junli had promised to do so, and even after all these years, he still kept the lock, a bittersweet reminder of a time long past. The sight of it brought both warmth and pain to the Lord, evoking memories of their former days together. Uncheon was, to him, a liar through and through, yet Ye Junli couldn't understand why the Celestial had been so cruel to him. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a shadow guard who brought news. Someone had cast a sealing spell at the bottom of the lake, one that suppressed the demon's powers, though it was still unknown who was behind it. Ye Junli immediately understood, an illusory sealing spell. If someone was caught in this type of illusion, their soul would endure unbearable torment and would never be able to reincarnate. There was a traitor in the temple of the gods, so the Lord ordered a thorough investigation of everyone who had recently visited the lake and instructed that everything be kept secret for the time being. Before leaving, he inquired about Uncheon's condition, and the response was satisfactory. The Celestial's health was stable, and he was now in a deep sleep. Later, when Ye Junli entered Uncheon's chambers, he stood watching him for a long time, noting how innocent and harmless he looked despite the cruel heart that lay hidden beneath that facade. Unexpectedly, in his sleep, the Celestial called out to the Lord by name and the nickname he used during their time together. This caused a sharp pang in Ye Junli's heart. He leaned closer to the sleeping figure, unable to believe what he had just heard. Uncheon continued calling out to his beloved in his sleep, and Ye Junli, unable to hold back, addressed him by the old nickname he used long ago. Suddenly, the blonde opened his eyes, causing Ye Junli to flinch and immediately pull his hand away from the other's face. However, Uncheon kept calling him by that same nickname, then boldly grabbed Ye Junli's wrist, pleading with him not to leave. The Lord was confused by what was happening, but the Celestial insisted, saying that he wasn't feeling well. After a moment of hesitation, Ye Junli finally asked his former lover where he was in pain. Uncheon pointed to his forehead, and as it turned out, he had a fever, so Ye Junli decided to call for the healer right away. But the Celestial almost began to whimper, begging Ye Junli not to leave. He asked for a hug, explaining that it would make him feel better instantly. The Lord was stunned by what he heard, remembering how, in the past, the blonde would play this same game whenever he was ill. Hesitating for a moment, Ye Junli finally decided to embrace Uncheon, indulging him in this charade to its conclusion. In the end, the blonde peacefully fell asleep, and the Lord quickly left the chambers, hoping no one would notice him. But as if on cue, Ranchen appeared nearby, bringing a medicinal brew that would help the Celestial recover faster. Passing by, Ye Junli informed the healer that Uncheon was still feverish and needed a thorough examination. He also asked that the Celestial be taken to the mirror pavilion once he awoke. Ranchen didn't dare disobey the Lord's orders and soon found himself inside the chambers. Sitting down beside him, the healer asked how Uncheon was feeling. Surprisingly, everything seemed fine. After a good rest, his body had fully replenished its spiritual energy and the wounds no longer stung as much. Suddenly, Ranchen noticed the redness in Yunqian's eyes. Realizing he had been crying, he asked what the Celestial had dreamed about. Yunqian hesitated slightly, recalling his dream. It was not a nightmare, so he confidently assured the healer that there was nothing to worry about. Ranchen, seeing that Yunqian's condition had improved, felt a sense of relief. Handing the Celestial a cup of tea, the healer informed him that, from now on, he would be the one taking care of him. It was clear that Yunqian was disappointed. He realized that Ye Junli had passed him over to the healer because he was concerned only about the golden core. Ranchen explained that His Holiness had his reasons for doing so, but assured Yunqian that he would not harm him. The Celestial quietly agreed, sipping his tea, when the peaceful atmosphere was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of a shadow guard, announcing that Prince Qingyan had been injured, and the Lord requested the healer's immediate presence. Ranchen was confused by the sudden news. After all these years under Ye Junli's protection, the prince had never been harmed. Overhearing the conversation, Yunqian concluded that his former lover had developed feelings for Qingyan. Turning to Yunqian, the healer asked him to stay in the chambers and wait until he returned. But the blonde didn't want to sit alone, so he offered to accompany him, and after a brief hesitation, Ranchen agreed. In the main hall, Qingyan was shrieking and writhing, complaining of unbearable pain. Ye Junli sat nearby, paying no attention to the spectacle. But as soon as the healer arrived, he ordered him to examine the prince. While Ranchen conducted the examination, Yunqian observed from a distance. Qingyan was undeniably beautiful, so much so that Yunqian found himself staring. When the examination was over, the healer informed the Lord that the prince's pulse was normal and he wasn't injured at all. Realizing he had been deceived, Ye Junli grew furious, grabbing the fox by the scruff of his neck and dragging him toward the exit, ordering him to leave and stop wasting his time. But Qingyan shrieked so loudly that the Lord was forced to release him. Assuming an innocent posture, the fox began pleading for help, dramatically claiming that the Lord was trying to kill him. The argument looked comical from the outside, reminding Yunqian of how he too had often acted foolishly with Ye Junli in the past. Yet the Lord had never been angry with him and always indulged him without hesitation. However, after the incident with the golden core, Yunqian knew they could never be together again, and it pained him to see Ye Junli behave this way with someone else. Suddenly, the fox calmed down and shifted his attention to Yunqian, moving closer to scrutinize him. Deciding to play on the Celestial's emotions, Qingyan remarked that he had expected to see someone far more attractive than this. Smirking openly, the prince asked rhetorically how Ye Junli could ever have fallen in love with someone like Yunqian. The comment stung, and Yunqian clenched his fists in anger, but he also knew that neither his words nor his actions held any weight in these halls. Straightening up, the fox demanded that the golden core be returned to its rightful owner immediately, accusing Yunqian of using it as an excuse to get close to Ye Junli again. Yunqian waited for some kind of reaction from his former lover, but Ye Junli only stood by, watching the prince with a condescending gaze. Gathering his thoughts, the Celestial firmly stated that the fox was mistaken and that he had no intention of rekindling his old relationship with Ye Junli. As for the golden core, Yunqian declared that he would never give it up. The Lord barked sharply at Yunqian as he walked past, but the Celestial responded only with a fierce glare. Ye Junli froze in surprise. He had never seen Yunqian angry before. Ranchen, who had been observing the entire situation, requested permission to leave, as there were no further tasks for him. The prince attempted to stop him, but Ye Junli interrupted Qingyan, asking him to stop tormenting those around him. Despite the cheap theatrics of the jealousy scene, the fox had managed to help the Lord gauge Yunqian's true feelings. With just a few words, Qingyan had flustered the Celestial enough to send him running off in distress, proving that Yunqian was still very much in love with Ye Junli. The Lord lowered his gaze slightly, then with a hint of unease, remarked that the fox was only speaking nonsense. But Qingyan wasn't blind, nor was he a fool. He could clearly see that the two of them still had feelings for each other. From an outsider's perspective, It might seem like Ye Junli had exiled Uncheon to get him out of the way, but the prince believed more in the idea that the Lord was simply afraid of hurting him again. Ye Junli remained silent, contemplating the fox's words. Perhaps he was right, and Ye Junli just didn't want to admit it. That day, when he saw the vacant, barely open eyes of the Celestial, he felt a wave of concern like he had never experienced before. And in the bedchamber, when Yun Qian, still in a dreamlike state, had called his name with love and sorrow, Ye Junli couldn't deny how deeply moved he had been in that moment. Qing Yan, resting his head on his hand, couldn't understand what the Lord was waiting for. Instead of sitting idly, he should just go and comfort his former lover. After all, the sooner they talked, the sooner they could be together again. The prince also highlighted Yunqian's jealousy, and at that moment, Ye Junli realized the true meaning behind that fierce glare. Abruptly standing up, the Lord announced that he urgently needed to attend to something. The fox could only watch him leave, finally exhaling with satisfaction. He had succeeded in persuading the Lord. Meanwhile, Ranchen had led Yunqian to the Mirror Pavilion, where he would now reside, and where the healer would take good care of him. Yunqian was deeply distracted, so much so that he flinched when he felt someone's gaze on him. He barely managed to smile, asking Ranchen to repeat what he had just said. But instead, the healer reached out a hand toward his face, explaining that Yunqian didn't have to force a smile if he didn't feel like it. Yunqian laughed, immediately dodging the healer's hand, saying he had simply lost control of himself. At least that was the lie he told the healer, when in truth, he was saddened by the thought that Ye Junli had found a new lover. Ranchen wanted to explain that things weren't as they seemed, but before he could, the Lord appeared at the door, his imposing presence filling the room with tension. Entering, Ye Junli commanded the healer to leave, and once he and Yunqian were alone, the blonde immediately turned away, politely asking what the Lord was doing there. But Ye Junli deliberately ignored the question, instead noticing the tears in his eyes. Perhaps Qing Yan had been right, and deep down, Yunqian still had feelings for him. Calling for one of the servants, the Lord announced that in a few days he would be leaving the palace and that the Celestial would be accompanying him. He handed Yunqian a new set of clothes, ordering him to wear them so as not to disgrace his dignity with his ragged attire. The trip held no specific purpose. Ye Junli simply wanted to take Yunqian out of the demon realm, hoping it might prompt him to open up. Before leaving, the Lord briefly explained that the fox was unpredictable and often spoke nonsense. Most of the time, his words were far from the truth, so there was no need to take them to heart. Yunqian understood what Ye Junli was hinting at, but he still harbored doubts about the Lord's actions. After all, Ye Junli had become this way because Yunqian had forcibly taken his golden core, and deep in his heart, he must surely hate his former lover. The Celestial knew that this sudden kindness was merely a tactic to compel him to obediently return the golden core. Throughout the journey, Ye Junli did nothing but silently watch Yunqian, not uttering a single word. He had hoped that taking Yunqian out of the palace would have a positive effect, but the Celestial looked miserable and remained unusually quiet the entire time. Suddenly, Yunqian seemed to come to life when he overheard market vendors enthusiastically praising their goods. He even turned his head toward the window to get a better look, and this spark of liveliness didn't escape Ye Junli's notice. Without hesitation, the Lord ordered the carriage to stop near a nearby inn so they could take a break. Soon, the four of them sat around a small table, listening to one of the shadow guards share stories about a book he had recently read. Addressing Ranchen and the guard, Ye Junli gave them permission to drink freely and enjoy themselves without restraint. His rare generosity was only because they hadn't left the palace in a long time. Noticing how intently Yunqian was eyeing the jug of wine, Ranchen offered him a taste. Before giving an answer, the Celestial glanced at Ye Junli as if seeking permission, but none came, so he declined. Unfortunately, Yunqian quickly became drunk and soon lost control after drinking. This had been the case in the past, and it was only through Ye Junli's supervision that he had avoided embarrassing himself in front of others. However, the Lord didn't object this time. After all, nothing bound them together anymore, and he promised not to interfere. This remark soured Yunqian's mood, as he couldn't understand why he should cling to the past when there was nothing left between them but fierce hatred. Without much thought, the Celestial grabbed the jug and downed its contents in one gulp. Everyone at the table froze in shock, except Ranchen, who quickly snatched the wine away, scolding Uncheon for drinking too much at once as the wine was quite strong. But Uncheon didn't care anymore. In an instant, he lost consciousness, completely drunk. To prevent him from hurting himself, Ye Junli swiftly caught the Celestial with one hand, announcing to the group that they would be staying at the inn for an additional day. Ran Chen tried to warn the Lord that something seemed off with Uncheon, but Ye Junli didn't listen and left without a word. The guard had to calm the healer down, explaining that the Lord had his own plans and they should simply continue drinking. Once inside the room, Ye Junli carefully laid Uncheon on the bed and was about to cover him with a blanket when the Celestial began to resist and shout. The Lord realized that Uncheon was truly drunk, his youthful appearance unchanged after all these years. In his drunken state, Uncheon rambled incoherently, but mostly complained about feeling too hot, so Ye Junli begrudgingly helped him remove his outer clothing while grumbling under his breath. Suddenly, the Celestial opened his eyes and called Ye Junli by his old nickname. Sitting up, Uncheon reached out and wrapped his arms around Ye Junli's neck, provocatively pulling him closer as if inviting him for a kiss.